Imagine waking up one day and the world has forgotten your name. The phone is not dead, but it has chosen silence. No blinking dots, no digital confetti. You open an app by reflex and it opens you, a clean, empty page that does not care you exist. You wait for the electric flutter in your chest that usually follows the little red numbers, but nothing arrives. Your reflection in the screen looks like a stranger trying to remember your face. You stumble to the mirror and the glass feels like another screen, something that returns an image but not a meaning. You mouth your name to yourself softly, as if it belongs to someone else. Have you ever noticed how much of your life has been a performance? Not a malicious one, not even a conscious one, but a steady choreography of glances, gestures, and jokes calibrated for an audience that always seems present, even when no one is there. You rehearse lines without noticing. You feel for the applause in the dark. And then the paradox. The more connected you became, the more alone you learned to be. You built a life broadcast to many people, and somehow you outsourced intimacy to a crowd. You wanted to be seen so deeply that you began to live on the surface. How did that happen? When did your heartbeat begin to sync with the metronome of approval? Why did your joy start to feel rented, yours only as long as the likes arrived on time? You tell yourself it's natural to want recognition. It is, but would you still choose the same job, the same partner, the same words if no one ever clapped? If your story could not be curated, captioned, and applauded, would it still feel true? Are you the author of your life or the actor reading lines written by strangers' expectations? What is the sound of your own voice when the algorithm stops listening? If a moment is beautiful and no one records it, does it still count? Imagine a stage whose lights never turn off. At first, the brightness feels holy. The faces beyond the glare look like a promise, belonging, security, proof. You step into the glow and it blesses you. But the longer you stand there, the more the light burns your pupils, the more the faces blur, the more your imagination fills the blur with judgment. You scratch at your skin thinking it itches, but it's only that you can't remove their eyes. You tell yourself you are free, but you can't remember the last time you did something that wasn't designed to be seen. Here is the contradiction that keeps you suspended. Validation feels like oxygen and acts like opium. It helps you breathe and makes you forget how to breathe on your own. Approval is a compass until it becomes a cage. It buys you belonging at the exact price of your authority. It is the most comforting leash you will ever wear. Consider the micro motions of your day. You check your phone and the phone checks your pulse. You refresh the page and the page refreshes you. You compose a message and rewrite it twice, not to be honest, but to be desirable. You tell a story and feel the edges sharpening, facts bending, colors bloating into something more cinematic, because you've learned that reality must audition before it is allowed to live inside the feed. When did your life become a pitch? The world nods along. It says, it's just human nature. It says we all need a little encouragement. Of course you do, but if encouragement turns into permission, if recognition becomes the gate through which every emotion must pass to be real, what happens to the parts of you that never make it past the bouncer? What happens to the slow, quiet joys that don't photograph well? What happens to grief when it refuses to trend? There's a subtle training underway, and you feel it under your skin like weather. You learn to anticipate the reaction before you finish the sentence. You learn to shape your laughter so it fits the room. You learn to sand down your edges because edges draw controversy, and controversy threatens the supply of praise. You start speaking in captions. Your memories reroute themselves for aesthetic. You live 2 seconds ahead of yourself, designing the reception while the experience is still being born. And at night you lie awake, wondering why your life looks perfect and feels counterfeit. Here then is the great question pressing its thumb against your throat. Who assigns your worth, and why have you appointed them God? If your value can be granted by others, it can be revoked by others. If the weather of public opinion determines the climate of your soul, what happens to you in winter? If you are real only when watched, where do you go when the room empties? Is praise a halo or a leash? Is there any difference when you cannot take it off? Maybe you think this tension is small, just a modern annoyance, a quirk of technology, But the hunger you feel is older than any screen. It is carved into childhood, a set of eyes that taught you who you were, long before you had words to resist. It is coded into stories about what a good person looks like, what a worthy life earns, which masks are allowed in which rooms. It is the gaze you swallowed until it became your own. So you stand there in the cooling light of a day without notifications, and something shakes loose. The walls of yourself feel thin. The applause meter is broken. For the first time in a long time, you ask not for feedback, but for truth. What if the room goes quiet and that is not a threat, but an invitation? What if the silence isn't empty, but a doorway? Hold that question in your hands for a moment. Let it burn. Because to step free, you must first see the trap. And the trap is older, subtler, and more intimate than you think. If you're ready, we can turn around and face the machinery behind this hunger, the anatomy of the need itself, the logic that taught you to trade your sovereignty for a smile, the hidden problem, and its psychological, philosophical roots. Turn around, and you see the machinery, not of silicon and glass, but of memory and myth. Before there were screens, there were eyes. Before algorithms, there were parents, teachers, tribes. You learned to be visible before you learned to be. That is the hidden problem. The mirror got installed before the face. Carl Jung would call it the persona, the mask you forged to meet the expectations of the world. At first, it keeps you safe. It translates the rawness of your being into socially acceptable shapes. But over time, you mistake the mask for your skin. You polish it so diligently that the living face beneath grows pale, light-starved. Meanwhile, the shadow, the parts of you that never won applause, retreats, hoarding its unloved truths, growing strong in darkness. You sense the pressure of this split as a quiet tremor, the feeling that you are always slightly out of phase with yourself. Why do you feel fraudulent when you are praised? Because the praise lands on the mask, not the marrow. If Jung offers the anatomy of the split, Nietzsche names the climate in which it thrives. Herd morality. The crowd's gaze becomes your god. The warmth of belonging demands a tithe. You disown impulses that threaten the tribe's approval and worship the virtues that keep you domesticated. You trade the wildness of become who you are for the comfort of be what we need. Ressentiment sweetens the deal. It feels good to be approved for being good, even if good is only the name for what keeps you small. Is the love you receive love for you or for your compliance? Schopenhauer would say the hunger is older still. The will to live wants to perpetuate itself, and it uses desire like reins. Approval becomes one of its cleverest harnesses because it promises an end to wanting while multiplying want. You are granted one hit of significance and find yourself thirstier. The will doesn't want satisfaction, it wants the chase. So you keep running. Then comes Sartre, sliding a mirror under your life with clinical precision. Under the look of the other, you become an object to yourself, a thing with handles of perception. You knead yourself into shapes that predict and preempt judgment. You live in bad faith when you deny your freedom by hiding behind roles. I am just an employee. I am just a good daughter. I am just a person who gets likes. Freedom terrifies precisely because it exposes you to the silence beyond applause. If there's no role to hide in, who are you when they stop watching? This philosophical scaffolding is reinforced by psychology's quieter bricks. Attachment theory whispers that your nervous system learned this hunger before your vocabulary formed. A caregiver's eyes are the first mirror. If love arrived mostly when you performed, quiet child, smiling child, exceptional child, you learn to trade authenticity for connection. Donald Winnicott called this the false self, a clever shell that adapts so thoroughly it forgets what it protects. Even praise can be perilous when it conditions you into an instrument for other people's calm. Behaviorists map the mechanics of the trap. B.F. Skinner found that the most addictive rewards arrive on variable schedules. Sometimes the pellet drops, sometimes it doesn't. In your life, the pellet is approval. The timing is inconsistent enough to keep you checking, refreshing, contorting, because the next time might be the one that proves you matter. Your brain obliges with dopamine, a chemical promise not of contentment, but of pursuit. It is not the satisfaction of being seen that hooks you. It is the anticipation that you might be seen more. Leon Festinger's social comparison theory adds another layer. You learn who you are by measuring yourself against others. But the yardstick is rigged. You compare your backstage to everyone else's front stage, as Irving Goffman would put it. The performance of self used to have a backstage where you could unrest, breathe, misstep. Cultural shifts in the architecture of platforms have dragged the dressing room into the public square. You live under a velvet curtain proscenium that never closes. Every stumble threatens identity because identity has been outsourced to the audience. Society smiles paternally and calls this aspirational. It sells you the story of merit, just work, just shine, and smuggles in the premise that your worth is market-priced. Aldous Huxley imagined a world where pleasure pacifies rebellion. You don't need a totalitarian state when you can build a velvet prison of likes, promotions, and gold stars. Who needs iron chains when silky ones feel like honor cords? Who dares to ask whether they are free when they are comfortable? Meanwhile, the invisible tower looms. Bentham designed the panopticon. Foucault warned how its logic seeps into souls. Even when no guard is present, you police yourself because you might be watched. The algorithms replicate this gaze without needing intention or malice. You internalize the inspector. You become prisoner and guard, manager and managed, the gaze and the gazed upon. How do you rebel against a captor who lives in your head and speaks in your own voice? Neuroscience lends a blueprint to this inner prison. Your brain is a prediction machine. It builds models of what earns approval and then filters experience through them. The salience network prioritizes what seems socially relevant. The amygdala flares at the scent of rejection because, in our evolutionary script, ostracism meant death. The default mode network spins narratives that stitch your life into a coherent self. But the threads come too often from other people's fabric. The more you practice the story "I am what they applaud," the more neurologically fluent it becomes. Pathways thicken, choice narrows. It starts to feel like truth. Self-determination theory insists fulfillment arises from autonomy, competence, relatedness. External validation mimics all three while undermining them. You feel autonomous while chasing other people's criteria. You feel competent as long as scores rise. You feel related as long as you perform connection on cue. But autonomy without self-authorship is compliance. Competence without intrinsic aim is vanity. Relatedness without vulnerability is theater. Why does the applause grow louder when you avoid your truth? Because it's the mask, not the marrow, that the crowd can easily organize around. There is also the cultural win, steady and scented with commerce. Corporations monetize attention. Attention monetizes self. Branding asks you to be consistent, digestible, repeatable. The logic leaks beyond products into persons. You become curator of a personal brand, disciplinarian of your own spontaneity. The irony cuts. In trying to be unforgettable, you numb the parts of you that could never be replicated. The safer you are, the less alive you feel. Viktor Frankl steps into this room of mirrors carrying meaning like a lantern. He saw that when meaning dies, substitutes rush in: pleasure, power, applause. An existential vacuum sucks at you. Validation rushes to fill it like air into a punctured lung. But approval can never be meaning. Meaning asks what you will live and die for. Validation asks who will like it. One is a vector, the other is a weather report. You cannot build a life on weather. All of this converges into one quiet revelation that feels like a confession you haven't yet dared to make. You did not simply stumble into the habit of seeking approval. You were trained, rewarded, philosophically prepared, socially nudged, neurologically tuned. This is why the hunger feels both intimate and inevitable. It wears your earliest memories and your latest apps. It sounds like your mother's praise, your teacher's grade, your boss's nah, your follower count, your own inner critic rehearsing in a voice that isn't quite yours. So the hidden problem is not merely that you crave external validation. The problem is that you have been taught to interpret its presence as proof of reality, and its absence as the threat of non-existence. The trap is not the applause, it is the ontology you built around it. If the gaze is God, then the self becomes a priesthood of rituals designed to summon favor. What would it cost to dethrone the idol? What would it change to know that reality does not require an audience? Don't answer yet. Feel the charge of that question. Let it hum in the bones of your attention. Because before you can wrestle free, you must see how deep the gaze has sunk its roots into your choices, your relationships, your fears, your fantasies, your sense of time. If you're ready, we can follow those roots outward into the orchard they have grown, the world you think you inhabit, shaped by a need you barely admit. The unseen consequences. Walk back into your ordinary morning and look again. The coffee tastes the same, but your hand lifts the cup like a performer remembering the blocking. You check your messages before your breath deepens. You aren't thirsty for news, you're thirsty for proof. Your day begins not with intention, but with an audition. That small displacement, purpose deferred to perception, accumulates until it alters the climate of your life. In your career, the tilt is subtle and decisive. You choose projects that telegraph success rather than those that carve wisdom. You pick what photographs well, the title, the logo, the conference stage. Goodhart's law stalks the office. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Output turns into optics. You speak more in metrics than in meaning. Meetings orbit the slide that will impress the distant room rather than the question that keeps you awake at night. You feel productive by the hour and impoverished by the year. Is this what excellence looks like, or is it a choreography of appearing excellent? In your relationships, intimacy becomes theater. You curate candor like a tasting menu, vulnerable enough to seem real, polished enough to be palatable. You laugh to confirm chemistry. You text not to connect, but to manage the interval between replies, calibrating hunger to appear desirable, not desperate. Ghosting is not a glitch. It's a strategy, a way to preserve the illusion of being the chooser. Breadcrumbing keeps options warm because the possibility of being wanted flatters you more than the risk of being truly known. How many times have you softened the truth to protect your image inside someone else's mind? In your body, the nervous system keeps its ledger. Neuroception, the unconscious scanning for safety, reads the room for subtle cues of acceptance or rejection. The amygdala prefers false alarms to missed threats. It pulls you into vigilance. You draft messages in your head while you shower, rehearse responses to imaginary criticisms while you commute. Layer by layer, the allostatic load rises. Cortisol frays sleep. Shallow breathing convinces your heart that danger is near, even when you're scrolling in bed. The vagus nerve, designed to usher you back into calm, learns to wait for permission that never arrives. Creativity starves under this weather. Curiosity, a function of felt safety, goes on strike. Cognitive biases collude. The spotlight effect convinces you that everyone is noticing your every misstep, while most are lost inside their own mirrors. Social proof whispers that if others applaud, the thing must be good. You outsource discernment to the crowd and call it consensus. The bandwagon effect warms your legs. You ride until the scenery starts to look identical. Confirmation bias tightens the loop. You seek data that validates your strategy of being valid. Loss aversion seals the cage. Better to keep the praise you've earned than risk it by speaking an inconvenient truth. Status quo bias hums. Don't rock the boat that's carrying your applause. Culture rewards your compliance and calls it maturity. In school, grades train you to convert curiosity into currency. The question becomes, is this on the test? Not, is this alive? You learn what to highlight for the examiner rather than what to underline for your soul. In the workplace, performance reviews and public dashboards gamify human worth. The company says, bring your whole self to work, then measures the fraction that boosts quarterly narratives. You adapt because adaptation looks like success, forgetting that adaptation can also look like a slow, polite disappearance. The consequences scale. Politics becomes a theater of clippable moments. Policies with long horizons die because they do not trend. Leaders optimize for virality. Governance becomes a highlight reel. Outrage renders better than nuance. Algorithms promote what your nervous system cannot resist. Polarization is not only belief, It is a content strategy. Online, moderate voices underperform, so extremes rise like foam. The digital panopticon doesn't need a tyrant, it needs engagement. And you, wired for survival through attention, supply it. Slowly, the commons splinters into spectacles, each demanding allegiance, each promising status to the loyal. Art bends under the market's lens. Safe derivatives crowd the shelves because they feel like a guarantee. You sense the echo when a song is engineered for the chorus that will accompany a dance trend. You miss the crack in the voice that tells you a human risked themselves. Risk recedes because public failure is permanent now. The internet remembers even what you've outgrown. The creative act, once a sanctuary of inward listening, becomes an act of anticipatory analytics. You don't ask, what is trying to be born through me, but what would they share? The consequences reach even your sense of time. You don't inhabit moments, you cue them for later showcasing. The present becomes a staging area for future approval. You take pictures of sunsets you forgot to feel. The hippocampus writes memory, but you outsource it to the camera roll. Your default mode network later narrates a story of a life you half-lived. Anticipatory nostalgia replaces awe. You imagine how this will look from afar, and in doing so, step slightly outside the life you could have fully tasted. At the core of the self, a quiet corrosion spreads. The false self you constructed to earn love begins to ration access to your own interior. Interoception, your capacity to sense the body's signals, dims. You stop noticing what your gut says because the crowd is louder. Decisions that once required a room with your intuition now go through a board meeting of imaginary strangers. You feel empty and call it humility. You feel anxious and call it ambition. You are tired not from doing, but from maintaining the performance of doing. When you do rebel, it is often a simulation. You post about boundaries and wait for applause to consecrate them. You declare self-care and hope the chorus approves. Even dissent seeks witnesses, but rebellion that depends on recognition is only a new costume. The deeper revolt, one that operates even if unseen, feels dangerous precisely because the validation economy cannot metabolize it. What is the value of a choice that yields no likes? What is the worth of a day no one knows you lived? And then the environment evolves to match your hunger. Markets arise to sell you shortcuts to credibility. Followers for a fee, prestige by association, credentials without apprenticeship. Reputation becomes a commodity. Virtues, a branding exercise. Shame economies flourish. Honor is traded in public signals. Pluralistic ignorance seals the doors. Everyone thinks everyone else believes in the system, so no one speaks. Meanwhile, you feel a private ache, a dull grief when you scroll the highlight reels, a low-grade resentment toward those who seem free, a reflex to dismiss them as irresponsible because envy is intolerable. Is your irritation at their freedom a signal of the life you buried? The most dangerous consequence is quiet. You forget that another way exists. Habit narrows imagination. The prediction machine in your head stops proposing options that don't involve approval. You no longer choose between paths. You choose between strategies of display. The prison works best when the prisoner forgets the door. In that amnesia, you may become cruel, not out of malice, but out of hunger. You demand from others the approval you cannot give yourself. You punish those who threaten the optics of your world. You raise children who learn the choreography faster than you did. This is not melodrama. This is physics. Systems optimize for the signals they reward. When the signal is applause, the system will sacrifice truth, intimacy, curiosity, and courage to maximize applause. When you build a life on weather, you brace for storms and never learn the climate of your own soul. If the gaze has become God, your prayers will be performative, your sacraments public, your confessions market-tested. Do you feel the urgency yet, not as an argument, but as a physiological insistence? The tremor in your hand when the phone is silent? The way your chest constricts before you speak an unpopular truth? The way your joy feels rented? These are not quirks. They are messages from a self that refuses extinction. If the trap has colonized habit, culture, and even biology, then escape cannot be cosmetic. It must be a reconfiguration of attention, allegiance, and aim. You will not negotiate your way out with polite adjustments to settings. You will need a rebellion that begins in the most unmarketable place. Your unbroadcast life, the rebellion. How to break free. Rebellion begins where the audience can't follow. The most subversive move is not louder speech, but quieter allegiance. You don't fight the trap by getting better at performing. You step sideways and stop auditioning. The radical pivot is simple to say and hard to live. Trade "am I seen" for "am I true." You won't exile yourself from the world. You'll reverse the power flow. The gaze can remain, but it will no longer be your God. You will become the witness of your life, not the commodity of theirs. Start by changing the audience of record. Imagine the future version of you who has run out of days, your deathbed self, your clearest witness. Ask this one, would they applaud this choice if no one else knew? Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, not to a crowd, and in that privacy found a clarity that accidentally outlived empires. Frankl discovered a freedom that no guard could confiscate, the power to choose meaning. Make this your tribunal. You can respect opinions without paying them sovereignty. One audience, one vote, the one who must live with you when the lights dismantle. Establish off-stage hours, 1 hour a day closed to spectators, even imaginary ones. No cameras, no drafts destined for the feed, no mental rehearsal of how this will look. Use analog tools, paper, breath, the stubborn slowness of real thought. Make something you vow never to share, a sketch that belongs to a drawer, a song that lives only in the room, a paragraph that trains your hand to be honest rather than clever. Private excellence is the antidote to public addiction. You are rewiring your nervous system to recognize fulfillment without applause. It will feel like withdrawal. Stay. Take the vow of the unquantified. Hide like counts. Remove push notifications. Batch your checking to specific windows and keep them short. The variable reward schedule that kept you hooked will whine like a machine losing oil. And replace outcome metrics with fidelity metrics. Did I do the hard thing I said I value? Did I tell the truth in the room that mattered? Track verbs, not vanity. Learn, serve, create, repair. It will feel boring compared to spikes of approval. Boring is the new freedom. It's what mastery sounds like on day 3. Invite your shadow to breakfast. Jung warned that unloved parts don't disappear. They sabotage from behind the curtain. Write down the traits you hide to stay likable. Anger, silliness, tenderness, eccentricity. Give each a small appointment in your week, 10 minutes to scribble nonsense. A conversation where you admit envy rather than perform compassion. A walk where you cry without narrating it. Integration begets integrity. The more of you that is allowed to exist, the less hostage you are to curated love. When you refuse to amputate yourself for acceptance, you become less bribable. Train for social cold water. Your nervous system thinks rejection is death. Teach it otherwise with voluntary harmless exposures. Ask for a discount you probably won't get. Sing a single bar aloud on a quiet street. Give an unpolished opinion in a meeting and don't add apologetic emojis. Jung sought 100 rejections to immunize himself. You don't need 100. You need enough micro-embarrassments to discover that your skin does not, in fact, combust. Each small risk widens the corridor inside which truth can breathe. Courage is not a trait, it's a practice of tolerating heat. Choose craftsmanship over display. Pick one hard thing, woodworking, a language, a field of study, and apprentice yourself in secret. Accumulate 1,000 unshared reps. Emily Dickinson wrote nearly 2,000 poems to a drawer. The drawer did not diminish their voltage. Diogenes asked Alexander the Great to step out of his sunlight. You reclaim your sun the moment you stop positioning your craft under the weather of applause. Excellence that did not audition acquires a different weight. It makes you belong to your work more than to the watchers. Reparent your nervous system. Offer yourself the mirroring you missed. Before you seek feedback, give yourself validation. Name what you did well that aligns with your values. Name what you'll refine because you value growth, not because you fear judgment. When anxiety surges, try a script. I see your worry. You want to keep us safe. Thank you. Safety now is truth, not approval. This isn't sentimentality, it's neural training. You are building secure attachment to your own word. Adler called it the courage to be disliked. It is finally the courage to prefer self-respect over borrowed comfort. Form a witness of one. Not a crowd, not a brand ambassador for your authenticity. One person who does not confuse your worth with your performance. A friend, therapist, mentor, spiritual director. Deliberately practice unmarketable truth in this sanctuary. Say the ugly thing. Bring the messy draft. Let yourself be seen where the point is seeing, not scoring. Paradoxically, deep private honesty amplifies public steadiness. You stop flooding rooms with need when some part of you has a place to tell the truth without an audience. Write a manifesto that isn't for sale. 3 to 5 non-negotiables that describe the person you intend to be, not the image you intend to maintain. Keep it simple, verb forward, portable. Tell the truth even when it empties rooms. Choose service over optics. Protect deep work. Practice wonder. Repair harm. Read it each morning. At night, ask only, where did I betray or uphold this? Not to self-flagellate, but to build credibility with yourself. When your self-trust rises, the volume of other people's verdicts drops. Break the economy by how you love. Offer others the thing you're learning to offer yourself. Approval unhooked from performance. Compliment a friend for qualities that don't trend. Patience, attentiveness, humility. Refuse to collude in performative vulnerability. Praise someone for changing their mind publicly, for fumbling toward truth, for being boring while becoming whole. To free yourself from the market, stop being a distributor. Every time you withhold conditionality, you weaken the walls. You make it safer for others to do unfashionable courage. You widen the silent conspiracy of people who are done performing. These moves are not retreats. They are repatriations. You are not leaving the world. You are returning to it with your soul attached. The emails still arrive, the meetings still happen, the platforms still glow. But their physics change. You enter rooms carrying an internal climate that weather cannot hijack. You speak the sentence that costs you followers and gain an hour of sleep. You choose a project that nobody understands and find yourself energized rather than displayed. Each act is a vote for a different world, where worth is inherent, meaning is chosen, and truth does not wait for a camera. At first, the gains are not fireworks. You will feel unchosen. You will feel inconvenient. You will grieve the simplicity of being adored for a mask you've outgrown. Then a subtler satisfaction arrives. You notice your breath deepen in situations that used to spin you. You create without calculating. You love without bargaining. And you start to suspect a realization larger than any tactic, that you never had to become worthy to begin with, that your worth preceded the market, the mirror, the myth, the ultimate truth, the final solution, the most powerful realization. There comes a point in any honest revolt when noise won't serve you. The slogans, the tactics, the carefully rationed bravery, they run their course. You stand at the edge of your strategies and feel a hush that doesn't ask for a caption. This is where the trap reveals its final trick. It taught you to believe that worth is a currency, that identity is a brand, that existence is a performance, when in fact all along you are not the product but the presence. You are not the actor on the stage or the audience in the dark. You are the light that makes both visible. If that sounds like poetry, let it. Poetry is sometimes what truth uses to pass our defenses. Sit still and notice what has been constant while your roles have rotated. The witnessing awareness that has watched you be a child hungry for praise, a teenager tuned to gossip, an adult behind a dashboard of numbers. That witness has never been upgraded, rated, canceled, or applauded. It's the you that remains when the room empties. The trap depends on you forgetting this and mistaking yourself for the mask that gets clapped for. Here is the paradigm shift. Esteem is optional. Dignity is not. Esteem is what others feel about you. Dignity is what you are before anyone looks. Esteem fluctuates with the weather of opinion. the trends, the angles. Dignity is barometric pressure, there whether you notice it or not. You can grow in skills, reputation, influence, and those will change the amount of attention you receive, perhaps even the good you can do. But they do not alter your basic worth by a single atom. Your value is not a variable. It is a given. The market can measure esteem. It has no instrument capable of touching dignity. The addiction to validation is not a sign of moral failure. It is a misunderstanding of ontology. Somewhere a story convinced you that being loved makes you real. That story is backwards. You are real, therefore, you can be loved. Love does not arrive to certify you. It appears because reality recognizes itself in you. This is why applause never satisfies for long. You are asking a mirror to give you a face. Mirrors can reflect. They cannot confer existence. Does this awareness make you indifferent to opinion? No, it relocates opinion to its proper place. Informative, sometimes useful, never sovereign. Feedback can sharpen craft, reveal blind spots, mend relationships. But when you stand in your dignity, feedback lands on your work, not on your worth. Criticism stings without defining you. Praise warms without owning you. You carry an internal gravity that keeps your orbit stable while planets pass. Look again at the philosophers. Sartre described the look of the other as a trap that turns you into an object. Step one level further back. You are not the object, you are not the look. You are that which can notice both. Meister Eckhart said, "The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me." The mystics were not confusing syntax. They were pointing to a seamlessness behind performance. The witness in you is not a personal brand. It is a window into a field of being that does not ask for credentials. When you rest there, you no longer live to be seen. You live because you are alive. This is the realization that rearranges your past. Every contortion you made to earn approval was a misdirected prayer, a sincere longing for contact with reality. You were whispering, "Tell me I exist," and the universe was quietly replying, "You do," before, during, and after the applause. You confused the echo for the voice. Now you can hear the voice. From this vantage, rebellion looks different. You don't need to manufacture courage. You uncover it by subtracting what is false. You don't need to invent meaning. You choose it with clarity, because meaning is not a product to be consumed, but a relationship to what matters. You don't need to withdraw from the world. You enter it unbribed, bringing a presence that steadies rooms. You can be generous with recognition because you no longer hoard it as oxygen. You can be criticized without either collapsing or counterattacking, because the verdict no longer threatens your existence. You can change your mind publicly because truth matters more than continuity of persona. Paradoxically, you will become more useful to the world once you stop treating the world as an examiner. Only people who don't need applause can do the work that does not immediately win it. Only those anchored in dignity can tell inconvenient truths without cruelty. Only those who are not auditioning can make art that risks failure, research that risks ridicule, friendships that risk silence, leadership that risks being misunderstood. Your life stops being a billboard and becomes a bridge. But what is this awareness in daily practice? It is a posture. It is the simple act of returning again and again to the fact of being. When anxiety spikes, locate the witness. The sensation of breath touching your nostrils, the weight of your feet, the pure feeling of seeing. Ask, who is noticing this? The answer is not a name or a resume. It's a silence that isn't empty. It's capacity. When you move from that place, you show up differently to praise and blame alike. You are no longer a cork on the ocean. You are the ocean noticing its own waves. You feared that if you stopped chasing approval, you would become lazy or isolated. The opposite occurs. When you remove performance as motive, what remains is clean desire, the urge to build, serve, learn, love, not to be seen doing it, but because doing it is its own rightness. This is what Frankl hinted at. Meaning is discovered, not bestowed. Approval can decorate a meaningful life. It cannot replace one. You will find yourself drawn to the long arcs again, projects that ripen slowly, relationships that deepen off-camera, practices that pay invisible dividends. Quiet joy replaces loud hunger. And what about belonging? You feared that without the theater, you would be alone. Yet belonging begins when the audition ends. When you stop curating yourself as a product, you become available as a person. You will lose some audiences, those attached to your mask, but you will find your people, the ones who prefer your presence to your performance. Love that doesn't require you to amputate yourself is not only possible, it is inevitable when you stand where you cannot be sold. The final, simplest truth is this: you do not need to be validated to be valuable, and you do not need to be visible to be real. Your existence is not a vote. You are already the stage on which your life unfolds, the light by which it is seen, and the audience of one who can witness it honestly. When you trust this, applause becomes a pleasant weather pattern, not a prophecy. Silence becomes instruction, not exile. So walk outside with no purpose, but to feel your feet meet the earth. Leave your phone face down on a table and put your hand on your chest until you hear a rhythm older than algorithms. Tell a small truth to someone who matters and do not check their face while you say it. Start a project that confuses the crowd and steadies your soul. Offer praise where it costs you status and gives someone else courage. Plant a tree you will never sit under. There are 100 ways to practice reality. At night, when the lights dim and the chorus recedes, listen. Existence hums. The stars do not ask to be verified. The ocean does not submit for review. The wind does not seek 5 stars. They are, and so are you. Tomorrow, the world will try to rent your attention and resell it back to you as proof you exist. Smile. Pay it no tithe. Step into the day not as a product for inspection, but as a presence for use. Let your life become a quiet, unprofitable miracle, seen or unseen, applauded or ignored. Then, when applause comes, let it pass through you like weather over a mountain. Noticed, appreciated, unnecessary. This is the exit from the trap and the entrance to your life, not a performance, not a brand, not a negotiation. A being, a choice, a steady vow. I will not trade my dignity for decoration. I will not ask a mirror for a face. I will live as though my worth were settled, because it is. And from that ground, I will make something worthy of the breath I've been given.